Okay, just making sure my lighting is correct. Oh, YouTube makes me glow like that. No, some the white glare. Okay. Now that we got that out of the way. Hello and welcome to the Streaming Parson reads Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. As you can kind of see on the cover here, this is the depiction, I guess, of the Green Knight. Everything's green, so yeah, Green Knight. Welcome to 2021. We're here, guys, and today we're gonna start with a very mellow stream. It's gonna be pretty relaxed today. I do have a few projects coming up, and I will talk about what they are, but I'll kind of save that for the end of the stream. Let me get this out of the way so it's not glowing here. What's going on here? Get this out of here. There you go. That's better. And yeah, today will just be a very mellow. I'll read a short story. It should only take me like one, maybe. Well, it'll take me 2 streams because I'm gonna read it slowly. It'll take 2 streams to read this. So we'll start with something pretty mellow today. And then like tomorrow I'll be doing something else, and I'll let you know what that is toward the end of the stream. So, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. It's a story of basically one of the many legends that are pertained to Arthurian legend, right? And you know, all the King Arthur lore and the King Arthur literature, which I am a big fan of. It's something I've always enjoyed reading, so it would be my pleasure to read to you, you know, some Arthurian legend. And so today we're going to be reading about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Gawain is an interesting character, as you will see. And yeah, let's just dive right into it, shall we? So the book is, or the story is divided into 2 acts. So I'll just refer to Act 1 and then Act 2. So Act 1. When the war and the siege of Troy were all over, and the city flattened by smoking rubble, the man who betrayed it was brought to trial, most certainly guilty of terrible crimes. Then the noble Aeneas and his royal line swept across Europe and lived as the rulers of every country in the Western world. Powerful Romulus settled at Rome and founded that city of great distinction. He gave it that name, which is what it's still known by. Tisius made his base at the blue Tuscan hills, and Longobard his on Lombardy's plain. But over the Channel, illustrious Brutus colonized Britain and its rolling mountains, to his great content. War, reprisal, exploit has happened here many times. Joy and disaster have often taken turns. After Britain was founded by this powerful leader, brave people were bred there with a liking for war. My nose is itchy for some reason. Who chose to do battle in turbulent times. More marvels too have occurred in our land than anywhere else since the fall of Troy. Of all that ruled here as the kings of the Britons, the noblest was Arthur, by all account. So my purpose now is to describe an adventure, which people agree was clearly an event, extraordinary even by the standards of Arthur. If you'll pay attention for just a short while, I'll tell it straight, just as I heard it. Word for word, exactly as passed down in every detail. By each generations down all the days. I'm just going to change my lighting a bit here. No, it's too bright. Give me a second. Before it was like kind of too dark. Now it's like too bright. It's kind of hard to find that middle ground. See, like this is kind of too dark, right? But you just have to deal with it because I don't want it to be too bright. Anyway, continuing on. It was Christmas at Camelot, and there was the king with his leading lords, all his best soldiers, the famous company of the whole Round Table, celebrating in style, and not a care in the world. Again and again strong men tussled, and the noble knights jousted with vigor, until they rode to the court to start on the dancing. Celebrations continued the whole of a fortnight, with all the feasting and the pleasures that people could think of. It was fine to hear such glorious commotion, lively uproar, all day, and dancing all night. The sheerest indulgence in dance hall and bedroom by the ladies and lords, whatever whim took them. With all worldly pleasures they dwelt there together. The most famous knights in the annals of Christendom, the prettiest women that ever drew breath, and the handsomest king at the head of them all. For these were people in the flower of life in that hall. Most successful in the world, their king held full control. It would be hard nowadays to find such fellowship. With the change of the calendar on New Year's Day, the courses were doubled for the top table. When the king and the knights arrived in the hall and mass was over in the echoing chapel, the singing continued from the priest and the rest, and Noel was called out over and over. Then out they ran to bring in the presents, and shouting, "Greetings!" they handed them round, excitedly arguing which were the best. Ladies laughed outright when asked to pay up, and the men who won favors were hardly complaining. And all this cavorting went on until mealtime. When they dressed for dinner, they took their places, the nobler the higher in proper degree. Now Guinevere the queen was set in the middle, elegantly dressed on her rich throne, cushioned in silks beneath her red canopy, and hanging around her Tharcian drapes, embroidered and studded with the finest gems that money could buy at the highest price. Too beautiful to describe. Her gray eyes shone. No one could ever say they had seen a greater beauty. But Arthur would not eat until everyone was served. He was so young and impulsive, you might even call him boyish. He liked life eventful, and he could not bear to lie late in bed or sit down for too long. So much of his young blood and active brain roused him. He had another ritual he kept to as well, one on such major feasts. By tradition, he would never sit and eat before someone told him a new story of some great adventure, some major marvel he could fully believe in, about princes or armed feats or other great deeds. Or else until someone asked for a knight to fight against, to risk life in combat, man against man, and life against life, to see which of them fortune would favor. This was the king's humor when he was in court with his gracious company at every grand feast. So with proud bearing he stood there in his place, full of life at New Year. He was cheering with them all. So there he stood, the powerful king, before the high table, making grateful small talk. Noble Sir Gawain sat next to the queen, and Gawain, the hard hand, on her other side. Both the king's nephews and trustworthy knights. Bishop Baldwin was at the head of the table, and Gawain, son of Urien, sat by his side. See, at the top, these were served with honor, and then all the knights along the side tables. In came the first course, to the pealing of trumpets that had brilliant banners hanging beneath them, the beating of drums and the noble pipes with their martial music awakened the echoes, so that every heart leapt, aroused by the sound. Delicacies were brought of the rarest foods in endless abundance, on plates of such number it was hard to find room in front of the diners, to set down the silver that held all these dishes. No one stinted them, as they all helped themselves. 12 dishes to each couple, good beer and gleaming wine. Now I'll give you no more details about this rich feast. You've gotten the idea that there was no shortage. But suddenly a strange noise came to their ears, which might free the king to sit down to the table. Hardly had the clatter of plates died down and the first course been duly served to the court, when a monstrous apparition strode in the door. One of the tallest creatures in the whole of the earth, so square and powerful from neck to waist. His thighs and his forearms so muscly and long, you think he was some kind of half-giant. But I think he was the hugest of men, the most pleased with his size of anyone living. For though his back and his chest were incredibly big, his stomach and waist were fashionably trim, and all of his features in proportion, given his size, exactly right. They were shocked by his color, though, apparent at first glance. What was most uncanny was that he was green from head to toe. This man and his clothes were all colored green. He had a tight-fitting coat, well made for his size. Over it he wore an elegant cloak, lined with bleached fur, and the braid was edged with the richest ermine, the same with his hood, which was off his head and draped on his shoulders. Neat, tight stockings of the same color clung to his calves. His polished spurs were gleaming gold, shining on silk. and his feet stood shoeless on the stirrups, and all his attire was totally green. To the stripes on his belt, and the various gems that were lavishly studded on every part, on a background of silk, on saddle and tunic. It would be too much to list half the adornments stitched on his clothes. The birds and the insects all splashed on bright green, set against gold. All the horses tackling the rich crupper. The bosses on the bit was an emelded metal. An emelded metal. The stirrups he stood on embellished the same way. Saddle bows too, and the regal horse cloths that shone and sparkled with their green jewels. The horse he was mounted on exactly the same in every detail. A green horse, strong and well set, a steed hard to hold back, but by the embroidered reins responsive to his rider. This man was a picture, dressed in green as he was, and the mane of his horse an identical color. Luxuriant hair wrapped around his shoulders. A huge beard like a bush hung over his chest, matching the long hair that flowed from his head, cut all around just over the elbows, so that half of his arms were wreathed around by it, like the cloak of a king closed in at the neck. The mane of the big horse was cropped the same way, waved and curled, with rich ringlets, woven with golden thread into the green hair. One strand of hair, then one strand of gold. His tail and his forelock were plaited the same way, and each bound up with a ribbon of green. The docked tail had gems the whole of its length, and was tied at the top with an intricate knot, where many gold burnished bells rang out. A horse of such a kind, or such a man astride it, they had never seen in that hall before. He looked as fast as lightning, so all that saw him said, it seemed as if no man could survive beneath his blows. But he was wearing neither helmet nor mail coat, nor any breastplate or armor at all. Neither spear nor shield to thrust or to strike. But in one hand he had a bough of holly, the greenest tree when groves are bare, and an axe in the other, outlandishly big, too cruel a weapon for words to describe. The huge head was a meter in length, the blade of fresh steel and colored gold. The edge shone brightly, and the broad blade was as well honed to cut as the sharpest razor. The shaft the man gripped it was made of hard wood. Nice. Reinforced with iron right to the end, and all engraved with silk work in green. A cord was wrapped around it, tied at the head, crossed over all the length of the handle, with many precious tassels fixed along it. This knight rode in, right into the hall, and strode up to the dais, fearful of nothing. The dais, by the way, is basically like, if you ever see, like, in a lot of those medieval movies, there's like that empty area that's in front of, like, the head table. You know, you see this at weddings too, right? Where, like, basically they like to keep this area empty in front of the the wedding party's table, and that's basically the dais. The dais nowadays is often used as like the dance floor too, right? Because usually after you're done at a wedding party, you go, you dance for a while, right? And so there's that little area in front. You move the tables a bit, and you expand that area. That area is called the dais. So basically, this guy just walks in all the way through the dining hall, up to basically the royal table where Arthur is seated at. He acknowledged no one, but looked over their heads. And the first thing he said was, "Where is the noblest of all of this crowd? I'd like to speak with him in particular, to exchange some words politely." He looked at all the knights, glancing up and down, and stopped to consider who had utmost honor there. They all gazed and gazed upon this green stranger, because everyone wondered what it could mean that a rider and horse might be such a color. Green as grass, and greener it seemed than green enamel glowing bright against gold. They all stood wondering. Then they crept a bit closer, transfixed with wonder as to what he would do. They had seen many marvels, but nothing like this, so they assumed it must be magic and witchcraft. Most noble knights were afraid to respond, so stunned by his voice that they stayed there, shocked still. In an eerie silence which filled the great hall, their voices were as silent as if they had fallen asleep. I think not all from fear, but partly through courtesy, they left it to the king to make some response. When Arthur from the dais saw all that was happening, he greeted him at once, for he was fearful of nothing. And Arthur said, "Good sir, you are welcome indeed to this place. I am Arthur, the head of the house. Please dismount and stay, I beg you. And later we will learn what your pleasure might be." "By the high Lord of heaven," he answered. Oh, sorry. I thought that was still Arthur talking. "By the high Lord of heaven. No, thank you. I have not come to linger here long, but because your praises are so highly sung, sir, and because your knights are reputed the best and the strongest in arms of riders on horseback, most brave and most worthy of all humankind, valiant to engage within all noble sports, here is shown chivalry, or so I am told. And it is simply that which brings me here now. But be reassured by this branch that I carry, that I come in peace, not looking for strife. If I had come in war with violent intentions, I've got armor at home and a helmet as well, a shield and sharp spear, both shining bright, and other weapons to wield. I assure you of that. But I don't want battle. My dress is for peace. If you are as brave as everyone says, you will generously grant me the exchange I ask for as a right." Arthur answered, saying, "Most graciously, sir. If you want single combat, you will not lack it here." "No, I do not want to fight. I swear it in all honesty. On those benches they are mere adolescents. If I were fully armed on my powerful horse, there is no one to match me here, so small is their strength." All I ask in this court is one Christmas game. At this New Year holiday, with young people all round. If any in this company thinks himself brave, so hot in his blood, and so wild in his head, that he dare give a stroke in exchange for another, I'll make him a present of this handsome weapon, this weighty axe to wield as he wants to, and I'll take the first blow as I stand here defenseless. If anyone's so warlike as to give what I ask for, to come here and take over this weapon, I relinquish it for good. He can call it his own. I will stand for his blow, unflinching on the floor, provided you agree that I may give a stroke in return. I will give him a respite of 1 year and a day. Now come on, let's find out if anyone dares to speak. So just real talk here. When a guy comes up to you and gives you this weird ass challenge of like, hey, let's do a shot for shot, like with this giant axe that I have here, right? And I'll let you have the first swing. If you hear a guy say something like that, you gotta know something's up. And you're gonna find out what that something is pretty quickly. Because, like, you gotta know, like, here's the thing, like, you gotta know something's up when he's like, oh, but the exchange is I have to land a hit on you. But wouldn't the assumption be that if someone swings a giant axe at you, you know, and it hits you, you're probably gonna die. So, when this guy is making this challenge like this, you gotta know something's up, right? Something just ain't right about this. And I don't know why, but now I'm starting to feel tired. Like, I was perfectly fine before the stream started, but maybe I'll take my glasses off. Maybe that'll help a bit. But the funny truth is that, like, now that I'm back to work 4 days a week, Monday streams might be hard to do continuously because, you know, I come home, wash your face, change your clothes. I don't shower right away because I want to do this and then now shower afterward. But after like 6 hours of work, I'm like kind of tired. So we'll see how much I can keep this up, right? Because I'm starting to feel it already. I'm pretty tired. And now I know some people may say, well, like, I mean, the only real option is like maybe not stream Mondays or like stream Monday nights, but I mean that's definitely an option. Like just waiting until nighttime, like nap in the afternoon kind of thing, and then do it at nighttime. But then I don't want to like do night times too often because, you know, if there's like people on like the East Coast, for example, that tune in, it would be really late for you, and I want to be sensitive about that. But I know I'm also aware that it's like really early for people on the West Coast, especially now that school is also back in order. So now that school's open again, you know, some of you guys might not be coming home till now, and I've already read like, you know, 10 pages, so in like half an hour. So, well, we'll see how much longer I can keep this up, because like, I don't know, I'm starting to feel tired for some reason. But as I said in the description, excuse me, today's going to be a lot more mellow, right? Just starting the year off kind of easy. And just trying to get myself into the mood of streaming. Anyway, let's move on. If they were astonished at first, they grew even more silent. All the warriors in the hall, the great and lesser. The man on horseback turned in the saddle and scarily glared round with his red eyes. Well, that's ominous, right? The dude's green and he's got red eyes. Like just imagine what this guy looks like. I mean, you don't really have to, because I already told you what he looks like. He's all green, got some gold on his robe. He's got red eyes to top it off. His beard sweeping all directions to see who'd stand up. When no one responded, he snorted aloud, drew himself up, and laughed and launched into speech.
"Well," said the knight, "so this is Arthur's court, whose fame spreads wide through so many kingdoms. Where is your pride now? Where are your conquests, your battles and fierceness, and your big words? It seems the Round Table's fame and celebrity are banished with a word from one man's voice. Since all of you tremble before a blow has been struck."
And he laughed so loud that the king was outraged. For shame the blood rushed up to his cheeks and noble face. He grew as angry as the wind. They all did who were there. The king, so brave by nature, stepped to the huge knight's side and said, "Sir, for God's sake, your request is foolish. But if that's what you want, it's a right you should get it. I know of no one who fears your big words. Now give me your axe, for the love of God, and I will grant you the favor you ask for." He jumped quickly across and reached for his hand, and the other man dismounted aggressively. Arthur held his axe, gripped the handle, and swung it around grimly, as if meaning to take a strike. The man towering above him, taller than anyone there by a head and more. With full self-assurance, he stood stroking his beard, till with a calm face he drew down his tunic, no more frightened of Arthur's great threats than if it were someone offering him a glass of wine. Gawain, next to the queen, leaned over towards the king. "I beg you, most fervently, to let me take this on." I need a different voice for Gawain, actually. Let me think. Because I don't want to give him a soft voice like I did with Arthur, so. But I don't want to give him a hard, like, too hard a voice either, and you can tell my vocal range isn't very great. But, "I beg you, most fervently, to let me take this on. If you, noble lord," said Gawain to the king, "let me rise from this bench, and stand with you there, to move from the table without giving offence, if there is no objection from my lady the queen, I'll take over from you before all the court. For I think it unfitting, as is surely the case, when this arrogant request is made in your hall, that you should feel moved to meet it yourself. While so many brave knights are sitting all around you, than whom no men on earth are more ready and willing, nor abler in body, when battle begins. I'm the weakest, I know, and the feeblest of spirit, so my life would be the least loss. It is simply true. My only worth is that you are my uncle, my body's sole value that your blood runs through it. Since this crazy task is not fitting for you, and since I asked for it first, you should pass it to me. If I speak out of turn, then don't let this court be blamed." The noble knights consulted, and all advised the same, to exempt the royal king and give Gawain the task. Then the king commanded his knight to stand, and he rose up at once, acting more properly. He knelt before the king and took hold of the weapon. Arthur yielded it freely, and raised up his hand, and gave Gawain God's blessing, urging him that his heart should be resolute, and his hand should too. Be sure, cousin, the king said, to make your cut right. If you do it effectively, I believe for sure that you can wait without worry for the blow he gives you. Gawain went to the knight with an axe in his hand, and squarely awaited him, in no way afraid. The knight in green addressed Sir Gawain.
We must recap our terms before we go further. But first, let me ask you to tell me your name. Tell me honestly, so I can believe you.
That's the first yawn of the stream. Truly, said the good knight, I am called Gawain. I will offer you this blow, whatever comes after. 12 months from now I will take one from you, with what weapon you choose, and from nobody else alive. The other man answered,
Sir Gawain, by my life I swear, I am entirely happy that you should strike this blow.
By God. Sorry, I thought it was Gawain talking.
By God, Sir Gawain,
The Green Knight then said. Oh, it actually identifies him as the Green Knight. The Green Knight then said,
I'm glad it's from your hands. I'm to get what I asked for, and you've rightly described in every detail the full exchange that I asked of the king. Except to assure me on your word of honor that you will seek me yourself wherever you think I may be found on the earth, and take repayment of what you gave me today, or what you give me today before this assembly. Because he hasn't given it to him yet, so I don't know why I used the past tense there. But where must I look? Said Gawain. Where do you live? Sorry. I swear by my maker I have no notion, and I don't know either your court or your name. But give me directions and say what you are called, and I'll do my best to make my way there. I solemnly swear it on my word and honor. That's enough. Sorry. See, sometimes the dialogue here is kind of really janky because like they don't do the typical like skip to the next line and indent, which is something that's commonly used in like writing, especially in like modern novels. But I mean, this is like an Arthurian poem, so it doesn't follow the regular writing conventions. There's 2 yawns. But yeah, keep that in mind as well. Like the differences between like technically the Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is more like a poem. It's a really long poem, but it's a poem apparently, so it doesn't follow the same writing conventions as you would a novel. But with that said, that means I'm probably going to get some of the dialogue wrong here.
Anyway, continuing on.
That's enough this new year. There's no more to be said,
said the Green Knight to the noble Gawain. Oh, excuse me. Let's make that 3.
If I tell you at all when I've taken the blow, and you struck me as agreed, if I tell you then of my house and my home, and what my name is, then you can keep our agreement by feeling my strength. And if I say nothing, then so much the better for you. Stay at home and look no further. But enough! Now take your grim weapon, and let's see how you strike.
With pleasure, sir, said Gawain, wielding or weighing his axe. The Green Knight then duly took up his position, and bent his head down a bit, exposing the skin. His luxuriant hair, that's a great word, luxuriant. His luxuriant hair he drew over his head, to leave his neck exposed to view. Gawain gripped his axe and lifted it up, his left foot forward, square on the ground, and dropped the blade swiftly on the unguarded skin, so that the warrior's weapon shattered the bones and cut through the flesh, severing it completely, so the shining edge bit into the floor. The handsome head fell from the neck to the ground, and several of them kicked it away as it rolled. Blood gushed from the body and shone red against green. And yet the man neither staggered nor fell, but stepping out strongly on his vigorous legs, to the horror reached out to where the knight stood, took hold of his beautiful head and lifted it up. Then he returned to his horse and seized the reins, stepped up on the stirrups and leapt on its back, holding his head by the hair with his hand. He sat in the saddle just as securely as if nothing had happened to him, headless though he was. And you actually kind of notice that in this picture, that he has no head. You look carefully. Like this is supposed to be, this is supposed to be his arm, right? So this actually here is an empty cavity where his head would be. Yeah, like here's supposed to be where his head is, right? But he doesn't have a head. But of course the funny thing about this picture is that you don't see him holding his head either. Because from the looks of, like, maybe because it's like off panel, right? Like his arm that's here might be holding like his head high, kind of thing, right? Maybe. But it's kind of funny that it's not depicted here. You don't see his head. And that was intention. Oh, excuse me, that's 4 yawns. This is actually intentional that he's missing his head in this picture. But with that being said, I mean, what is up with this guy, right? Okay. Just find where I left off. Whew. So make a counter, that's 5. He swung his body round, a disfigured, bleeding trunk. Many there were shaking by the time he'd finished speaking. He held the head up straight with his hand and turned the face towards the king who sat on the throne. So yeah, he's like holding it up. Right? He raised his eyelids and stared at him open-eyed, which I bet, no doubt, probably scared people there. Then with his mouth said the words you will hear.
Be sure, Gawain, you're ready.
Oh. That is 6.
Be sure, Gawain, you're ready as you have sworn to seek contentiously until you find me. As you've said in this hall, in these knights' hearing, seek out the Green Chapel. I urge you to get such a blow as you have struck. You've earned the right to be promptly repaid on New Year's morning. Most people call me the Green Chapel Knight.
But we're just gonna call him the Green Knight from now on.
So if you ask, you will not fail to find me. Therefore, come, or be called a defaulter.
Basically a coward. And with a violent tug, he pulled the reins around and galloped out the hall door, his head in his hand, so that fire from the flint sparked off the hooves. To whatever country he went, no one there knew. No one there knew any more than what they knew where'd he come from at first. What is next? The king and Gawain then laughed at this green man, but they had to face the truth that it was unnatural. I mean, the guy survived having his head chopped off, so yeah, clearly not natural. If the noble King Arthur was uncertain at heart, he didn't let it show. Unlike me, apparently. But with a brave voice spoke to the Queen in delicate words. My dear wife, do not be dismayed. Such activities are fitting at Christmas. Playing of games, laughter and singing, with the seasonal dancing of ladies and knights. In any case, I can eat with a good conscience. I can hardly deny that what I've seen is a marvel. He gazed then at Gawain and addressed him directly. Now, sir, hang up your axe. It has done enough hewing. So it was placed above the throne against the wall hangings, where everyone could view it as a wonder and tell of those marvels by pointing it out. Then they turned to the table, the two of them together, the king and the great knight who were rapidly served. 7. Double measures of everything, as befits the most noble. With all kinds of food to accompany music, they spent the day in enjoyment until it ended all around the world. Now take care, Sir Gawain, not to shrink from danger. This is quite an ordeal that you have taken on. So that's Act 1. Now we're moving on to Act 2. I think this is like total 4 acts or something. I'm just checking. Yeah, it's like total 4 acts. So maybe I'll just read Act 2 and then I'll call it because holy moly, I am feeling super sleepy. So maybe Monday stream's going to be a little bit tough if like, you know, I got to work from like 8 to 2. So we'll see how that goes, right? Because even like the night before, I did sleep pretty early. I went to sleep at like just before 12. Get up at like 7. You would think so. Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just a me thing, or maybe it's just me getting older. But like, I'm almost at that point where like, I have to sleep more than the hours I work in a given day, because I don't know, my stamina is just that pathetic or something. And so, if I don't get more sleep than hours I work in a day, I'm just gonna die during the later day. As you can see that now, right? And I also don't like this lighting business. What's going on here? Okay, let me turn the computer screen back on and turn this light off. See, now it's way too dark, right? Well, I think it's fine like this. It will be a little hard. It'll be a little bit more straining on my eyes to see, but for you guys, it won't be like bright, and so. Cause here's the other thing too, that this a streamer's secret, if you will. But when we use OBS and we actually use the OBS for reference of like what the what you guys see, OBS apparently changes the lighting a little bit, and so with OBS it's actually a little bit darker, I think. I'll have to check. I think OBS is a little darker. So even though it looks pretty dark for me, it should be more than light enough for you. Okay. Read Act 2 and then we'll call it, because I'm feeling really tired for some reason now. I guess, like, if I'm going to stream on Mondays, I have to, like, go to bed at, like, 9 o'clock Sunday night, and then wake up at 7, so I get, like, 10 hours of sleep. Just so I'm not dying by the time we get to 4 p.m. Because, maybe it's just a thing, like, I'm getting older now, but, I don't know, I feel like that's the case with me now. Like, I have to sleep a lot in order to, like, and this is true on any day that I work, right? Because with my job, I do a lot of moving around, and I go through a lot of trouble in it. Security work sucks. You just gotta deal with it, right? So I do a lot of moving around, and so that, I guess, takes a lot out of me, right? Because if it's like a day, like for example tomorrow, I'll feel a lot better. I won't be as tired because tomorrow I don't work, right? So since I'm not working tomorrow, I one, can sleep in. I don't have to like wake up at like before 7. And 2, I won't expend that much energy before I stream tomorrow. So hopefully by tomorrow I'll feel a lot better. But today I'm just like blah, blah, blah. But we're gonna truck through Act 2 and then we'll call it. And then I'll do some housekeeping about what we're gonna do for 2021, January 2021 for streams. Act 2. This adventure was a fine New Year's gift for Arthur to get, for he loved to have challenges. If topics were lacking when they sat to the table, now they'd much deadly matter to keep their tongues busy. Gawain was pleased that he started all these hall games, but don't be surprised if the outcome is tragic. Though people are cheering when they've been drinking, a year passes quickly and changes its moods. The end rarely matches the spirit it starts in. Definitely could say that about 2020. Certainly didn't end as nicely as it started. Because, I mean, 2020 was just all downhill, basically, right? So Yuletide is past and the New Year is too, and each season follows the other in sequence. After Christmas comes shriveling Lent that tries the body with fish and dry bread. Then the earth's weather weakens the winter, and cold shrinks underground. The clouds draw up higher. The bright rain falls in warming showers straight onto the ground so that the flowers appear. Both meadows and fields are covered in green. Birds hurry to build and sing with excitement. Out of joy at the summer that falls so sweetly, all over the hills, blossoms swell and bloom in dense, reckless array, and rich notes unpausing are heard through the wood. After the soft breeze of the summer season, and the west wind that fans seeds and grapes, and grasses, I don't know why I said grapes there, and grasses, the growth is abundant that issues all around. When the soaking dew drops off the leaves with the touch of heaven that the warm sun brings, But then comes autumn to harden the grain, and to warn it to ripen ahead of the winter. Its dryness makes the dust swirl around and fling up high off the face of the earth. The rough wind in the sky wrestles with the sun. The lime tree leaves loosen and fall to the ground, and the grass turns gray that had been so green. All ripens, then rots, that sprang in such hope. So the year passes on through its series of yesterdays, and winter comes around again, as nature demands, ever the same. The moon around Michaelmas has a touch of winter to it, and Gawain thinks again about his fearful quest. Yet until All Saints' Day, he stayed on with Arthur, who held a feast on that festival in honor of Gawain, with a great celebration by all the Round Table. So basically, now it's almost a year has passed, right? So the Green Knight showed up in basically New Year's Day, and then now it's already the 1st of November. So basically, like 10 months have passed, right? And we've gone into the 11th month. Fine knights and beautiful ladies were filled with despair for the sake of this man, but yet they displayed nothing but gaiety. Many who grieved for him were still making jokes. After dinner he spoke seriously to Arthur and talked of his journey, openly saying, "Now, Lord of my life, I ask leave to depart. You know how grave this adventure will be. To speak more of it pains would be wasted breath. But tomorrow I must set off to receive that blow, to seek out that creature in green, God help me." Then the best of the company crowded together, Gawain and Erec, and many another. Sir Dodinel the Wild, the Duke of Clarence, Lancelot and Lionel, the noble Lucan, Sir Bors and Sir Bedivere, both big men, and other famous knights, such as Mador de la Porte. All this great company drew near to the king, to advise Gawain with heavy hearts. Much deep sorrow was felt in the hall, that one as valued as him should go on this quest, with his to suffer a dire blow, unable to hit back with his sword. The knight still kept cheerful, and said, "Why should I despair? With destiny, good or bad, you can only take your chance." I'm going to turn this light back on. Let's see if I can... No, that really does nothing. I need like an extra screen thing here to like kind of not have this light be so bright. Anyway, moving on. He stayed all that day, and early next morning asked for his armor, which duly was brought. First an opulent carpet was laid on the floor, and the rich gold armor spread out upon it. The brave man stepped forward and handled the steel. Excuse me, that's 8. He was dressed in a tunic of rich Tharsian silk, and a finely cut cloak, buttoned to the neck, and trimmed on the inside with pure white fur. Then they set armed shoes on his feet, covered his legs in handsome steel greaves, with hinges attached, polished bright, and tied round the knees with knots of gold. Fine thigh sections elegantly encased, his strong muscular limbs fastened with leather. Last, the ornate armor of bright steel rings wrapped around the knight's proud clothes, with polished arm pieces on both sides. Elegant elbow guards and gloves of steel plate, all fine chainmail to stand him in good stead in his peril. A fine suit of armor. Gold spurs tied with care, and a trustworthy sword hanging by the finest silk. When he was fully dressed, his armor was lordly, the least link or knot shining with gold. Thus armed as he was, he went to hear mass. Hang on, just checking something here. Okay. Celebrated solemnly at the high altar. So basically Gawain's on his journey now and he's just passing by town to town basically. Then he went to the king and his court companions, and took fond farewells of the lords and the ladies, who escorted him with a kiss, praying for him to Christ. Then Gringolet was prepared, fitted with a saddle. Gringolet is the horse, by the way. Gringolet was prepared, fitted with a saddle that gleamed brightly with a line of gold fringes, newly harnessed all over, ready for the road. The bridle was plated with the brightest gold, and the ornate side skirts and rich chest trappings, crupper, and horse cloth matched the saddle bows. It was all fastened with light, red gold nails that shone and sparkled like the beams of the sun. Then Gawain fervently kissed his helmet, which was strongly forged and padded inside. It stood high on his head, clasped at the back, with a light silk band across the neck guard, picked out and encircled with the finest gems. On its broad silk edges, with birds such as parrots, embroidered on the seams amid periwinkles, and turtle doves, and love knots set there so thickly, it must have taken years for ladies to stitch them. The crown was worth more that encircled his head, made of diamonds, both bright and crystal clear. Then they brought him his shield, they brought him his shield of heraldic red, with the pentacle engraved in bright gold colors. He took it by the strap and pulled it round his neck, and it fitted him wonderfully well. And why was the pentacle so apt for this knight? I'm now going to tell you, even if it is digressing. What it is a symbol of Solomon that Solomon devised to represent truth and balance and justice. Because it is a figure with 5 points, each line overlapping and interlocking with the rest, so it has no end. It is called, I believe, the Endless Knot, in all parts of England. It's attached to this knight and his flawless arms, because Gawain was reputed in 5 ways faithful, and 5 times over refined as pure gold, devoid of all sin and marked with virtue wherever he went. And that's why he displayed this pentacle on his shield. As the man of truest fame and most pure in his speech. So basically he's got a pentagon on his shield crest thingy. I would assume it's a pentagon. It's some kind of 5-shaped object, right? I mean, I guess a pentagon is where like all the sides are equal, right? And so when it says a pentacle, it could be literally any kind of like shape and angle, right? The angles don't have to be equal, the sides don't have to be equal, right? But then like a pentagon, all the angles are equal, and by extension all the sides are also equal, because if you change the sides, then the angles are no longer equal. So when you say all the angles are equal, all the sides are also equal. A little bit of trigonometry knowledge there, if you didn't know that. First, Gawain was faultless in all 5 senses. Next, he never failed in his 5 fingers. And all his trust was in the 5 wounds of Christ on the cross, as the Bible describes. For those of you who don't know what those are, and this is another reason why, understanding your biblical literature. So the 5 wounds would be 1 on each hand, 1 on the feet, 1 on the side, and of course the 1 on his head. So the 5 wounds of Christ. Although technically, Jesus had way more, because he also had the whip lashings and all that stuff. But that's besides the point, right? When they talk about the 5 wounds of Christ, they're referring to the holes in his hands. Technically there'd be 2 holes in his 2 feet, but it's technically 1 wound on his legs, because when you're nailed to a cross, it's 1 nail through your 2 legs. So that would be 3. The crown of thorns on his head would be 4, and then the spear of Longinus on his side would be the 5th one. So those are the 5 wounds, by the way, if you didn't know that. And whenever this knight was hard pressed in battle, his firm belief, above all else, was that his strength came from the 5 joys that the noble Queen of Heaven took in her child, referring to Mary and the baby Jesus. It was fitting that Gawain had her image depicted inside his shield, so when he looked at it, his heart would not falter. The 5th virtues that Gawain maintained were generosity and sympathy, first of all. So he sounds like a great guy. Chastity and courtesy, which he never failed in. And above all, compassion. These 5 things were fixed more firmly in him than anyone else. And all 5 were rooted in this knight, each locked to the next, so that there was no end or beginning to any. Fixed and unwavering, neither overlaying nor divided on any side, without end at a corner to be found anywhere. No matter at which point you started to test them, on his shield this device was marked out with red gold on a red background. And yes, red gold is a real thing. The pure pentacle, the people called it traditionally. Now fine Gawain is ready. He takes his lance at once, and bids them all farewell, as he thought, forevermore. He spurred on his horse, which sprang on its way, with a force that made fire spark off the shoes. All who watched him sighed in their hearts, and all of them said the same to one another, concerned for their hero. By Christ, it is a pity that you will be lost, unrivaled as you are. It would be hard to find your equal in this world. It would have been better to act with more caution, so that this brave man ended up as a duke. He seems likely to have proved a brilliant leader, which would have been better than certain destruction. You sure about that? Beheaded by some ogre out of a foolish pride. Whoever knew a king to agree to such action over some silly competition such as knights have at Christmas? Should have thought about that, huh? Many a tear flowed down from their eyes when the handsome knight set off from the court that day. He did not delay, but set out on his quest. Many a wild road he went, as the book reports. And while this hero rode through the whole of England, Sir Gawain in God's cause, it seemed far from a game. Often friendless, he spent the night on his own, seeing before him nothing to please him. Through woods and valleys his sole comrade was his horse, as he had no one to speak except for his Maker. Till he travelled nearly as far as North Wales, the islands round Anglesey. Anglesey? Anglesey. There you go. That's how you say that. The islands round Anglesey he held to his left, crossing the fords along the high headlands by the Holy Head, till he returned to the shore by the wilds of the Wirral, where very few live, loved either by God or by men of good will. Continually he inquired of everyone he met if they knew anything about a green knight or a green chapel anywhere around there. They all said no, that never in their lives had they seen a person of such a color as green. The knight took strange routes over many joyless hills. His spirit would falter often before he'd seen the chapel. I mean, basically, this guy's just running around aimlessly for like a while, so well over a month probably. I mean, we actually know how long it takes him to get to where he's going, but we'll cover that when we get there. He struggled up cliffs in God-forsaken regions. Far from his friends, he wandered, a stranger. At every ford and stream that the warrior passed, it was rare if he found no foe to face him, so savage and aggressive that he had to fight it. He faced so many trials there in the hills, I couldn't recount a small fraction of them. At times he fought dragons, sometimes wolves, or trolls of the forest that sulked in the crags. He fought wild bulls and bears and boars as well. Well, after you talk about fighting dragons and wolves, this stuff kind of feels tame in comparison. And giants, oh there you go, who stalked him from the fells above. If he hadn't been alert and helped by the Lord, he would certainly have gone to his death. But bad as the fighting was, the winter was worse, as the ice-cold water poured from the clouds and froze before it hit the ground. Nearly killed by the sleet, he slept in his armor, night after night in naked rocks, where cold streams clattered down from the heights or hung over his head in hard spears of ice. Thus in danger and pain and terrible weather, the knight rode through the wilds all alone until Christmas. Devoutly that season. So now we're at Christmas, basically. So he's been riding for like 6 weeks at least. Almost even up to 7 weeks. Of course, by 7 weeks, he's almost completely at that year and a day, right? So let's just say like 6 weeks he's been running around. One morning, he rode in good heart by a hillside into a deep forest, endlessly wide. High hills on both sides, and below him dense woods of huge ancient oaks, massed in their hundreds. Hazel and hawthorn were tangled together, covered all over by rough, ragged moss, with desolate birds in the bare branches, all piping pitifully from the pain of the cold. The man on Gringolet passed beneath them, through swamps and through boglands, all on his own. Concerned for his obligations in case he should fail to honor the Lord, who that very night was born of a maiden to soften our sorrows. And so, sighing, he said, I beg you, Lord, and Mary, the dearest and mildest of mothers, for some shelter where I may devoutly hear Mass and Matins tomorrow. Most humbly I ask and say Our Father, Hail Mary, and Creed. He prayed as he rode, and wept for all his sins. Many times he blessed himself, saying, Christ's cross be my help. He had hardly blessed himself 3 times before he saw, in the wood, a moated dwelling on a mound above the plain, closed in by the branches of huge tree trunks all around his rampart. The finest castle a knight ever owned, pitched on a meadow with a park all around it. So I'm just looking at something here. Okay. Where was I? Oh, yes. From the outside he stared at the keep, as it shimmered and shone through mighty oaks. Then he took off his helmet and fervently thanked Christ and St. Julian, who had both shown him favor, safely leading him and hearing his prayer. Now I pray, he said, for good hospitality. Then he spurred on Gringolet with his gold heels, and came by good fortune to the main gate that led him directly to the end of the drawbridge straight ahead. The bridge was fully raised, the gates firmly shut, the walls well protected, secure from winter's blast. The man sat on his horse, which stopped at the edge of the deep double ditch that led to the castle. The walls went to great depth down into the water, and then towered aloft to a huge height, up to the cornices and the top buttresses. So, places huge towers, places pretty big. I mean, he's at a castle after all, basically. Elegant watchtowers rose up symmetrically, with well-crafted casements that closed to perfection. A finer castle he had never set eyes on. Inside he could see a soaring hall with ornamental turrets, the full length of it, and matching around towers. It was amazingly long, all topped with capstones artfully carved. He gazed on the many chalk-white chimneys that shone blindingly on the roofs of the towers. So many bleach-white pinnacles soaring there, clustered so thickly on the castle's battlements, that it looked as if it were cut out of paper. From outside on horseback, Gawain thought it was glorious. If only he could get inside those walls, and shelter in that castle for the holy season in comfort. He called, and there soon appeared a watchman overhead, who courteously asked what the wandering knight desired. "Good sir," said Gawain, "would you please bear my message? To the lord of this castle, my appeal for shelter." "By St. Peter," said the porter, "I am sure you will be welcome to stay here as long as you like." He went away quickly, and soon he was back with a fine company who welcomed Gawain. They let down the drawbridge, poured out in welcome, and fell to their knees on the freezing earth to greet this guest in the way they thought fit. They motioned him to the gate, drawn wide as it was. Gawain asked them to stand and rode over the bridge. Several held his saddle while he alighted, and a group of them stabled his horse. Knights and squires came thronging down to lead him with ceremony into the hall. When he lifted his helmet, they all rushed forward to help this guest, by taking it from his hands, and to take too his sword and his shield, when he warmly greeted each of those courtiers, and many proud men competed to honor him. They clothed him richly and led him into the hall, where a fine fire blazed in the hearth. Once again, you gotta know something's up when you enter someone else's house and everybody's a little bit too friendly. Something's up here. Just keep note of this. And the lord of the company came from his chamber to greet him in the hall with every due honor. And he said, "You are welcome to use as you wish. Everything here, all is yours, to have and to hold, to your heart's content." "Thank you," said Gawain, "and may Christ repay you for it." As men of similar manners, they embraced each other. Gawain gazed at this man who received him so kindly, and admired this fine figure who governed the castle. A powerful man in the prime of his life, his red beard was broad and luxuriant. He was vigorously built with muscular legs. His face was fire red, and his speech was polite. He seemed well suited, so Gawain thought, to lead a hall company of cultivated lords. The master showed him to his room and gave clear orders to bring a servant who would graciously attend to him. There were plenty of volunteers to answer his bidding and lead him to a chamber with handsome bed drapes. The silk curtains were hemmed with bright gold, and the counterpanes artfully paneled. With white fur at the top of the embroidered sides, the curtains were strung on gold-red rings. Silk textiles from Tars and Toulouse hung on the walls, and the same on the floor under his feet with admiring words. The man was relieved of his coat of mail and his splendid clothes. Then quickly they brought him handsome robes to choose which he liked best and have it put on. As soon as he chose one he'd like to be dressed in, it looked fine on him with its flowing skirt. He seemed in appearance to everyone there like a vision of spring, with all his limbs covered in the most glowing and brilliant colors. Christ never created a handsomer knight, they all thought. From wherever he came, it seemed as if he must be a prince without equal, in the field where fierce men fought. Before the fireplace where charcoal burned, a chair fit for Gawain was duly placed, with quilted cushions delicately worked. A colored cloak of shining silk was spread on his shoulders, embroidered ornately, and lined inside with the finest furs. All genuine ermine, his hood was the same. He sat on his very luxurious seat, and warmed himself through till his spirit rose. Soon a table was set up nearly on trestles, covered with a bright cloth of brilliant white. Then a tablecloth, salvers and silver spoons. He washed in comfort and went to his food. With the greatest civility the servants brought various stews, most richly seasoned, in double portions. There were all kinds of fish, some baked in bread, some roasted on coals, some boiled, some stewed and flavored with spices. There's lots of fish to go around, I guess. And all with subtle sauces to tempt the knight's palate. He called it a banquet, again and again, when they graciously begged him, "Please for now, take this penitential fare, for later it will be better." The man was full of merriment. The wine had gotten to his head. Then the prince was questioned, with all due tact, through polite requests that they put to him, till he modestly admitted what court he came from. Where Arthur the valiant and noble held sway as powerful lord of the royal round table, and that it was indeed Gawain who sat there, arrived that Christmas as chance had arranged it, or did it? When the Lord discovered that he had that night, he laughed out loud. He was so overjoyed, and all in the court took the greatest delight in appearing quickly in the presence of Gawain, to whose name was attached all glory and fame for refinement of virtue, and who was everywhere praised. Of all men in the world, his honor is greatest. Everyone quietly said to his neighbor, "Now we will see refinement in practice and the flawless terms of proper speech." We will learn how to excel in unlabored speaking, since we have here the master of manners. God has indeed given us his grace in plenty, in granting us such a great guest as Gawain. At the season when people gather to rejoice at his birth and sing, in the art of pure manners, this man will now instruct us. I believe whoever listens will learn all about love-talking. By the time dinner was over and the prince had stood up, it had nearly come to the fall of night. The chaplains made their way to the chapel and rang the bells loudly as they had to. For the high evensong of that great feast, the Lord responded, and the lady also. She gracefully entered a beautiful pew, and Gawain happily made his way there as well. The Lord took his sleeve and led him to his seat, greeted him by name in the friendliest way, and declared him the most welcome person alive. Gawain thanked him heartily, and after embracing, they sat together quietly throughout the service. The lady wanted a look at the knight, as she came from her pew with all her fine ladies. She was most beautiful, both in body and face, of figure and manners. Of all of them more beautiful than Guinevere, Gawain reflected, as she came through the chapel to greet her guest. Another woman led her by the left hand, older than she was, a venerable lady. Most reverenced by those nobles, these ladies were very unlike in appearance, for the younger was fresh, while the other was withered. I mean, don't be hating on the elderly, my guy. Bright red adorned the first lady all over. Rough, wrinkled cheeks hung slack on the other. The young one wore scarves and many bright pearls. Her breast and white throat exposed to view. So basically like a nice cleavage shot. Shone brighter than new fallen snow on the hillside. The old lady's neck was covered by a wimple, pulled over her sallow chin with chalk-white veils. Her forehead was masked in silk, muffled all over, covered and screened with jewelry all around, so nothing could be seen but her gray eyebrows. Her eyes and nose and her bare lips, which were ghastly to look at the horribly chapped, hardly to be thought as worldly beauty. God save us all. Her body was short and fat, her buttocks spreading wide. Nicer to look upon was her companion, for sure. So, you know, there's an old as time trope in these kind of stories, right? You know, you got the super hot girl, you know, she's got a nice body, you know, got some cleavage shots going on there, you know, guys noticing that. And then who's she hanging out with? Like this ugly ass old hag, right? You know, it's kind of an old trope that's always been around, right? hot girl, old hag, right? Just hanging out together. Because of course the old hag would be like an attendant or something, right? She's like a, how would I put it? She'd be kind of like a nurse mother, like, you know, a wet nurse. Like basically, you would think of it like this. So the old hag would be like the younger woman's wet nurse, and even though she's no longer her wet nurse for obvious reasons, she still is kind of seen as like a parental figure, right? Like a godmother. And so basically that's what she is, right? The old hag is the pretty woman's godmother, and so and that would make sense because if you think of, well, I mean, you can guess, and there's a little bit of a problem you see in the story, but we'll cover that in a moment. As you can guess, this attractive woman is obviously the lady of the castle, right? Which means she's obviously left her birth mother behind, as tends to be in those days, right? You marry and then you live in the man's house, right? So this woman leaves her family, and the godmother travels with her. And so in a way, the godmother mainly becomes the main maternal figure for, you know, the lady of the castle. Because that tends to be how it is a lot in like medieval times. That's why in that culture you have godmothers, right? A lot of women have a godmother because of that reason. And so when a woman is married off, and oftentimes she has to move away because of it, usually the godmother will go with her, right? And she will act as the maternal figure. So that's why the trope exists, right? You know, of, you know, the young attractive maiden, and then she's hanging around this old hag, right? But really the old hag is just like an elderly woman that's also like kind of a mother figure to her. So, you know, you gotta show respect to that too, right? Unlike in this book where they just straight up describes like this ugly, fat, short lady, right? But you can also see what's going on here, right? Like Gawain's he's been away from home for like two months, you know, and he's also mature. He's also becoming older, and you know, there's this interesting contrast. You know, he's kind of seen as this character of virtue, but at the same time, he's also kind of sheltered, right? Because, you know, at the beginning of the story, we kind of talk about how Gawain he's nothing special, right? He's just, you know, he's only known because the king is his uncle. And so he's kind of seen as, he's only virtuous because he's lived a sheltered life. But as he's moved out in the world, you know, he's fought his fair share of, you know, trolls and stuff like that, right? He's a different kind of person. He's a person in the world now. And because of this, his perspective on stuff changes, right? So instead of viewing like his aunt basically as like the most beautiful woman, as you should kind of view the queen of your realm, if you will, instead he's kind of falling attraction to this other woman. Of course, as I've already kind of said earlier, you know, this woman is a married woman. So this guy is, you know, if you want to be real stickler about it, you know, Gawain is committing adultery in his heart in some senses. So not a real virtuous guy, which is kind of ironic when we're talking about, I mean, at the same time, it's kind of one of those things where like, it's the battle between, do you develop a culture of chivalry versus, you know, human nature, right? Because human nature is like, you know, we want to bone hot women, but we have to respect things like, you know, if a woman is another man's wife, right? And stuff like that. And so Gawain is obviously being, you know, he's crossing over the threshold of like being more in the world, if you will. And it's interesting that this is the transition that happens, right? That before he used to think like, oh, Guinevere's got to be the best woman, right? Because she's the queen, right? But now he sees like, you know, this other woman and is captivated by her beauty, right? So just keep this kind of thing in mind, because this will obviously be important when we talk about Gawain's evolution as a character. When Gawain saw the beauty who gazed on him sweetly, With the Lord's approval, he stepped out to meet them. He embraced the old lady, bowing down low and taking the other lightly in his arms, kissed her with grace and spoke with charm. They asked for his friendship, and he quickly begged to be their true servant, if it wouldn't displease them. Then they took him between them in keen conversation, led him to the fireplace, and called out at once for dessert, which men hassled to bring in abundance. With extravagant wines for every dish, the Lord very often sprang to his feet, asking for happiness to be on all sides. He swept off his hood, which he hung on a spear, and dared them to win the honor to hold it, so the greatest delight might last throughout Christmas. Let me just see. Okay, I'm just seeing who's talking here, so I do the right voice. And I will try, I promise, to vie with the best in protecting this garment, with the help of my friends. So laughing words, the Lord led the way to amuse Sir Gawain and the retainers in the hall that night, until the time came to call for the night lights. Sir Gawain took his leave and set off for bed. Just checking how much longer. We're almost halfway through the story. Which is funny because, like, you know, the story is actually really short. It's only like 100 pages, but like, not even. It's like 80 pages. It's like roughly 80 pages, and it's taking me like almost 2 hours to read 40 pages. But, you know, I don't want to do like an overly dry reading, right? And I also want to talk about some narrative themes in the story. Continuing on, next morning, when all people observe the time that our Lord was born to die for our good, there is joy for his sake in each earthly dwelling. It was the same in the castle, with comforts of all kinds. At every mealtime, accomplished chefs prepared subtle dishes to grace the high table. The elderly lady sat in the top place, and the Lord, I imagine, sat chivalrously by her. Gawain and the fair lady were sitting together, just in the middle where the servers came first. Before passing in turn to the rest of the hall, once all had been served according to rank, there was food and delight and general rejoicing, which wouldn't be easy for me to describe, supposing I even had the patience to try. But this much I know. Gawain and the lady took so much pleasure in each other's company, through the sweet endearments of their elegant words, with proper speech, free of dishonor, that their play surpassed any pastime of princes, no doubt about it. Trumpets and kettledrums and pipes rang out, with each man set on pleasure, as those two were. Let me try that again. Trumpets and kettledrums and pipes rang out, with each man set on pleasure, as those two were on theirs. Much joy was made there that day, and the next, and the following day too, was spent in daylight. The celebration for St. John's Day was marvelous to hear, and marked the end of feasting, as people there thought. Since the guests had to leave in the grey dawn, they stayed up very late, drinking the wine, and danced without pausing the finest set pieces. Finally, very late, they all took their leave, each visitor going his own way. As Gawain bade good night, the noble lord detained him, and brought him to his own room, close to the chimney. There he held him back, warmly thanking him for the joyful honor that he had conferred by visiting his castle in that festive season, and enriching the household with his graceful presence. As long as I live, sir, I will be the better for the visit of Gawain
at God's highest feast."
"Thank you," said Gawain, "but in truth all the honor is yours. May the High King of Heaven reward you, and I am your servant, to act out your will, as now I'm obliged to on every occasion as of right." The Lord did all he could to make the knight stay on, but Gawain assured him that he could not do that. And the Lord asked him directly what pressing cause in that holiday season made him determined to ride alone from the court, before the feast days were wholly over. "Indeed, sir," the knight said, "that's a good question. An urgent mission drove me from my court, because I am committed to seek out a place, and I don't know where it is in the world to search. For all the land of England, I wouldn't want to fail to find it by New Year's morning, so help me God. So, sir, now I appeal to you to tell me if by any chance you know of the Green Chapel, or on what ground it stands, and of the knight who lives there, whose color is green." "Between the two of us, we made an agreement that I would meet him there if I lived, and we're a short time away from our New Year deadline. If God gave me such a favor, I'd see that night more happily, and by God's Son, than possess any riches. So with your permission, I must certainly go, for I now have left but a bare 3 days, and I'd rather fall dead than fail in this task." Then laughing, the lord of the castle said, "Well now, you can stay. I can direct you there in plenty of time. No longer fret about the Green Chapel's whereabouts. You will stay in your comfortable bed till late in the morning, then set off at New Year, and be there by mid-morning to do what you want in that spot. Please, stay there until New Year's Day. Get up and set off then. Someone will lead the way. It's less than 2 miles off." So, once again, something is clearly up. I mean, Gawain ends up at this castle that apparently is like a 2-mile horse ride from the Green Chapel, which is where Gawain is looking for. And Gawain thought he was screwed over because he had like 3 days. But no, he just so happens to land in the right place, a stone's throw away from where he needs to be. And so basically now he's going to procrastinate and wait till New Year's morning to go confront him now. Because yes, of course. Then Gawain was happy and laughed with good cheer. "I thank you most for this, beyond everything else. Now my success is assured. At your requests I will stay on and do whatever you say." And the Lord clasped him and sat by his side, bidding the ladies he brought to cheer them still further. And they all sat together with great enjoyment. The Lord in great humor said such cheerful things, like a man losing his reason who didn't know what to do next. So basically now they're just like the two guys just having a couple extra like wine drinks or something, while getting served by a bunch of maids. So sounds like a great time actually. Then he called to the knight, shouting out loud, "You've undertaken to do what I ask? Will you keep that promise at this very moment?" "Most certainly yes," Gawain replied. "While I stay in your house, I am bound to your will." "You have come far," said the Lord, "and made a long journey. You sat late with me, and you're not well recovered in food or in sleep. I am certain of that. You must stay late in your room, lie at your ease until Mass time tomorrow, and go to your meals whenever you want. with my wife who'll stay with you and cheer you with her company until I get home. You stay here. I'll get up early and go out on the hunt. Gawain happily agreed to his wish. One more thing, said the Lord. Let's make an agreement. What I gain in the woods will be given to you, in exchange for whatever your luck gives you here. Dear friend, let us swear to make Dear friend, let us swear to make such a swap, whether we fare better or worse. All right, said Gawain. I am happy with that, and it suits me, if you want to play such a game. Let a drink be brought to secure the agreement, said the lord of the castle, and both of them laughed. They drank and lingered and acted light-heartedly, these lords and ladies, for as long as it pleased them. And then with French manners and elegant speeches, they stood and conversed and quietly spoke, before courteously kissing and taking their leave. Each of them was finally brought to their bed by willing servants with blazing torches, privately. But before they went to bed, they repeated their agreement. The expert lord and ruler knew how to run a game. Ominous! So that is the first half of the story. And just to do, like, you know, some small recap of that last part. So basically, the lord of the castle convinces Gawain to, like, hey, you know, like, you don't have to worry about searching for the green chapel. I know exactly where it is. Why don't you stay here for the next few days? All right? Just take it easy. You know? You've gone a long journey. Probably would have learned that Gawain had been traveling for like 6-7 weeks, right? So Lord Cat's like, you know, you've been traveling for a long time, guy. Like, you know, just relax here. And while you're here, though, why don't we do a little exchange thing? So I'm gonna do my normal thing, right? Go out, hunt for sport, because that's what nobles did back then. He's like, I'll go hunt for sport, do my thing, and you can just chill out here, right? And I will give you what I find on the fields, and you will give me whatever, like, if you get any trinkets and stuff while you're here. And Gawain's like, all right, you know, yeah, sure, we can play this game of yours. But let's be real here, like, so many things are just shady. Excuse me, like this whole, like, the second act, right? There's so many things just shady, right? Like, so first Gawain stumbles on this castle, right? And everybody's super friendly to him, right? A little bit too friendly. And on top of this, you know, the lord of the castle is also like this super friendly guy, and you know, the way the book describes him, if you haven't, you know, spoilers for like a super old Arthurian legend that you could easily look up on Wiki, and a story that people should know anyway. But, I mean, we all know who this guy is, right? Like, how do you not know who the Lord of the Castle is? The book goes out of its way of describing him a certain way. And you definitely would notice it, you know, just watch this, you know, since I've gone over the description in this stream, you kind of figure out who this Lord of the Castle is pretty quickly. And then, of course, you know, there's a lot of shifty things that this Lord of the Castle is kind of playing at here. So, obviously, there's like this, you know, that he's gonna like screw around with Gawain by leaving his wife home, right? And, you know, he probably knows that Gawain has noticed her, right? Because we already know that the super hot woman from earlier is the lady of the castle, right? And so, you know, it's kind of like one of those like soap opera, you know, affair kind of scenarios that appears to be brewing up here. And so that's kind of like red flags all over, right? And so, Gawain is actually positioned pretty badly because, he's the guy who's alone, right? He's not in Arthur's court, he's in someone else's. And so he's got to deal with some big challenges. And so we'll see what happens to Gawain in the future as he has to deal with staying at the castle. And of course he still has to he still has to meet the Green Knight, in 3 days' time. So that's a thing too, right? And so we'll see what happens to Gawain. But that will have to wait till another stream because I can already feel myself fading. And so I'm going to end the stream pretty soon. I'm just going to do some housekeeping and then we'll end the stream. So since we're in 2021, I'm going to do a couple new things on this channel. So starting tomorrow, I'm going to be playing Fire Emblem Three Houses. I'll be playing maddening mode for like the third or fourth time or whatever it is now. I've only played maddening mode like 4 times or something. Well, this will be the 4th time I'll play it. And so I will be doing the Blue Lions route, as I did a poll like a week ago and the votes were in, and it was overwhelmingly in favor of the Blue Lions. So that's the route we're going to do. And that will be starting tomorrow. And I will probably stream that on Wednesdays as well. We'll see. But starting tomorrow, it'll be 3 houses. Thursday, I still have to finish StarCraft, so we'll just continue that until we finish that. And then I have something new to do for Throwback Thursdays. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And then Friday, I will be reading through the book of Exodus. And that's kind of the plan for the next little while. That will be mostly January's stream schedule. So that's kind of how it is. That's kind of how it's going to be looking for now. Also keep your eyes peeled for more Shadow Dragon. I will be trying to finish that. And still got a ways to go, because I'm like just a little more than halfway through the game, really. Well, I say, like, even though there's like not as many maps remaining, technically since all the later maps are longer, I would say like a little more than halfway through the game. As opposed to some people saying like, well, you're about like 70% of the game. It's like, no. Right? That last 30% of the game you're talking about is actually like pretty long. So that would be my rebuttal to people who say like, well, you're 70% of the game. But so keep your eyes peeled for more Shadow Dragon Let's Play. And then I will tell you what I'll be doing for like video upload after Shadow Dragon. So that is going to be... So that's kind of how it looks for now, for the month of January and bleeding into February. And then of course, I do have something, planned out for February as well. But most of it will kind of be what we have set up now, right? So Fire Emblem Three Houses, Blue Lions, reading through the Book of Exodus. That will definitely be like January, February. And then we'll see what we do for Throwback Thursdays after StarCraft, because that will be like 1 or 2 more streams. And then of course Shadow Dragon's Let's Play to always keep your eyes open for, because I do have episodes ready and I will be uploading them mostly on a daily basis. I do leave Sundays out because I don't want to upload, and I kind of let you guys have Sunday as like a catch-up day if you haven't watched all the episodes, right? So, anyway, with that being said, that's all the announcements I have. So, here's where I'm going to be ending the stream. I'm actually feeling pretty tired, so maybe I'll take a nap or something. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Have a good evening, good night, and God bless you.